Guys, it's Sarah, and today we are going to talk about my favorite books that I read in 2023. I did a top 10, and the outcome is interesting. I really had a hard time narrowing it down to 10, but I was definitely keeping track during the year of, kind of making notes of what my favorites were as I was reading them. And then at the end, it was interesting going back through them and going, okay, I can take that off. I read that in March. Do I remember a whole lot about it? No, it was a 5-star read, but, not like a favorite compared to all the rest of them. So it was interesting going through that list, definitely. And I think I want to start doing that from now on, is keeping kind of a separate, not a ranking, but, just notes of my favorites as I'm reading throughout the year. It was a lot easier to kind of narrow it down. But these are the top 10. So I definitely have a top 2. Everything else is just whatever. No particular order. I did not rank them that way, but I definitely have top 2 for sure. Okay, so we'll do the other 8 first. The first one is Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. And this is her newest release. It came out in October. And I read it before the book came out because I was able to get an e-arc of it, which I was very, very grateful for. I was very excited about that. And I loved it. It is another darker book. It's not as dark as her other 2 mysteries. I'll say that. But it definitely still is in, kind of a tough situations, tough topics. This has a lot to do with religion. And we follow a girl who is the daughter of I guess we'll call him a preacher in this small town. As she grows up, she really kind of starts noticing the type of control that her father has over the townspeople and over the police and over, just anybody who really lives in that town. They all really flock to him. And she's kind of realizing, as she's getting older and wiser and understanding how things are actually working versus being a child growing up in that situation, she's realizing something's not right here. And she ends up meeting up again with someone that she knew in high school and someone that she has a really strong connection to. He ends up coming back into town for some reason, and she, they make that connection again, and things kind of go from there because the townspeople hate this boy. And it's really, really good. And the ending of this book, it took me a while to make a decision on if I loved it or hated it. I'm still kind of like, was that super annoying or was it brilliant? It's kind of both. So she got me. Like, it was fantastic. So Ashley Winstead is a favorite author, and it was great. Okay, next one is Wonderland. This is by Jennifer Hillier, another author that I just love and adore. Every book I've read from her so far has been fantastic, and I cannot wait to read more because I do have a little bit more of hers to read. And this one is set at a theme park called Wonderland, and we're following a detective who moves to this small town, and she is from there originally and knows the town, knows the theme park, knows that the theme park has, is kind of the main financial beneficiary for the town. So people want the theme park owners to be happy, basically, including the police department. And so you see a lot of corruption happening, and things are starting to kind of come out. There's a dead body that's found in the very beginning of this book at the theme park. And then her daughter ends up working at the theme park for the summer, because that's just what pretty much all teenagers in this town do, is they work there for a summer or however long they decide to work there. And her daughter is one of them. And so she gets herself mixed up in the middle of things as well, and kind of realizing what's going on behind the scenes. And it was great. She took me places I was not expecting, which is what she does. And it was so much fun. Okay, next is another favorite author. Seeing a theme here. Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I loved this book. This is another example of just his writing is just so charming, and it is so whimsical, and there are lines in here that are just brilliant and fantastic and make a lot of sense. This one is dealing with grief, and the in-between of life and death. We are following a man named Wallace, and he has died. He dies in the very beginning. He's not a very well-liked man. He's a hard man. He does not take other people into account. He doesn't really care about what other people think or do. It's all about the bottom line for him. So he passes away, and in between, life and death, he's realizing what people thought about him and learning some things about himself. And he finds this tea house in the middle of the woods. There he meets a man named Hugo, who is the owner of the tea shop and helps people on their transition. And it was so good. There were scenes in here that made me laugh out loud quite a few times. And the audiobook is fantastic. It's narrated by Kurt Graves, and he did a fantastic job. And I loved every word of it. I loved every word. The next one is Drowning by TJ Newman. This is another one I listened to on audiobook. The audiobook narrators for this were fantastic. It was Stephen Weber, who I love. I will listen to anything he reads, and Lauren Benanti. And it was this book, you guys. I was so nervous going into this because I am not a good flyer. I'm a very nervous flyer. I even at one point had to have an anti-anxiety medication to even get on the plane. I've gotten better. It's, just as I've gotten a little bit older, it's gotten a little bit better, but I'm still a little bit nervous about flying. I pray a lot on airplanes, and that's just how I am. But I was nervous going into this one because I was like, ooh, if I read this, am I ever going to want to get on another airplane? Don't worry, for me, it was fine. I could not put this book down. I listened to this in 2 sittings easily. I could have listened to it in one. I think I actually listened to probably 90% of it in one sitting. I just could not stop. It was so good. Action-packed the entire time. Fast-paced the entire time. So it definitely kept you going, kept you listening. I loved the characters in here and just the humanity in here. This book made me cry. I don't cry, but this book made me cry. And I cannot wait to read her other book, Falling, which is another airplane book. I cannot wait to read that one for sure. So this one follows a plane that goes down in the Pacific Ocean. It's a flight that is leaving Hawaii and going to San Francisco, and over the ocean it crashes. And how are they going to survive? And TJ Newman herself is a flight attendant, so she really knows the safety and procedures and all that stuff of what happens in a flight and in a crash. And so that just, to me, made it feel so real, and I loved it. Loved it. The next one that I have here is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is another one that I did listen to on audio, and the audiobook narrators for this one were Jennifer Kim and Julian, I think it's Cihi. It's Cihi is the other narrator for this one. The narration was fantastic, and I loved the story. I didn't love the characters. You're not really supposed to. They're not written in a very endearing way or made out to be, that they are just great people and all these things. They're very, very flawed, both of them. And their relationship is really all over the place. And you're not really always rooting for them, basically. But I still loved the story, and I loved where it went. I loved the things that were happening that completely surprised me. There was a lot going on, but the way that she wrote it did not make it feel like there was a lot going on. It wasn't too much for my brain. It didn't feel like it was trying to do too much. It just did things, and it made sense, and it flowed really, really well. So it was really, really well written for me. And yeah, I just loved it. I thought it was great. So this follows 2 best friends who meet in school, and they end up working together and developing a video game together, and it becomes a huge success. And then along with that comes all the pressure for another one and another one and another one, all the money grabs and all the things, all the extras, and go on tour and do this and do publicity and do all this stuff. And neither one of them want to be in the limelight. And yeah, it was just great. And then it's the strain that takes on their relationship as well as both friends and business partners is, also a very big thing in here. And I thought that was great. So I loved it. And I cannot wait to read more by this author. The next one I have here is Remarkably Bright Creatures. This is by Shelby Van Pelt. I adore this book. This is a book that has some of the best narration. Oh my goodness. I, again, listened to the audiobook of this one, and it is narrated by Marin Ireland and Michael Urie. And Michael Urie is the voice of Marcellus, the giant Pacific octopus, because you get his inner monologue throughout this book, and it was perfection. Just that audio narration alone makes this book a 5-star read. It is so good. The pretentiousness of this octopus was giving me life. I loved it, and I loved him. And I love that we get that in this book. It's so different and unique and just adds, a big layer to the story. So we're following a woman who is retired, but she is working as a janitor in an aquarium. She is grieving the loss of her husband and her son, and you are seeing her get this connection with this giant Pacific octopus, which there's definitely human connections between humans and these octopus. It's, something that's been researched and done and, all that stuff. And you see their connection, and you see this octopus start to care for this human, and he doesn't understand why. He doesn't want it. He definitely believes that he is the higher species, and it's just so funny. But you see him, start to care when she's not there, or worry about her. And you see the things that he does in order to either get her attention or, to make sure that she's okay. And you also get some perspectives from other characters. There were a lot of perspectives in here. I wasn't expecting quite that many, but it all made sense and it all flowed really, really well. And I loved the story. And it was fantastic. Okay, next one is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This is his newest release that came out over the summer. I loved this, and I think this might be my favorite Riley Sager book, which are big words because I've given 4 of his books now 5 stars. I think, like, nuts, something crazy like that. Most of his books I give him 5 stars. And I just love this one. So this is a Lizzie Borden inspired tale. We follow a woman who is a caretaker. She finds herself in trouble at work and just needs to take whatever she can get. And a job opening comes up for this elderly woman who is homebound, and she lives in this house on a cliff. And she is notorious in the town for the stigma of suspicion that she killed her family. The same way with Lizzie Borden. She was the only survivor, the only one home that night, like the only other person home that night, but she was saying it wasn't her and someone else did it. And, who did it, who didn't, will we ever know? Because she is also to a point in her life now where she's not speaking anymore and she can't communicate very well. She can't even move around very well, but things, start happening in this house. So our main character moves in and she becomes her full-time caretaker, and things just like weird things start happening. And so she's really questioning not only her own sanity, but like what's real and what's not, and what's true and what isn't. And she's meeting people from the past who were there that night or who were around and working in the house at the time. And so she's trying to piece some things together as well. And it was fantastic. And it was like left and right and left turn and right turn and left turn and left turn and right turn. And I loved it. I love it when he does that with his stories because I never know what to expect. And it always just surprises me and impresses me. So I loved it. Okay, last one before we get into the top 2. The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. I love Abby Jimenez. She's definitely become a favorite author of mine. And I'm really, really happy I like this one. I was a little bit nervous going into, basically her first book, but I loved it. I was so invested in these characters and their love story. So this follows Kristen and Josh, and they meet when their best friends are getting married, and they are, like the bridesmaid or the maid of honor / best man. They do not get along. They did not have a great first encounter, and it gets to a point where they are just on each other's nerves and almost doing it on purpose at that point. So they're not really getting along very well in the beginning. She has a boyfriend who is away. He's in the military and he's away from her right now. But they are engaged and planning to get married. But they spent most of their time apart. So that's been really difficult for her. She's also dealing with some other things that affect her life physically. And that's a big plot point in here as well. And you see her and Josh reluctantly start becoming closer. Some of it is a little bit forced. Some of it is by accident, but it just starts happening. And then you see this attraction start growing between them. And it's definitely not an instantaneous type thing. And she's definitely still engaged. So I really like the fact that Abby did not turn this into a cheating book. I'm very happy about that because that could have very easily happened. And the whole time I was just like, please don't do this. Please don't do this. And she didn't. And I'm very happy that she did that. But these characters, I lived for them. Josh, oh my gosh, can we please? I loved him so much the entire time. I loved him. And I loved this book. I was in it to win it the entire time. I tabbed it up a whole bunch. And Abby Jimenez has just solidified a favorite author for me with this one. Okay, top two. Number two is going to be funny because I'm holding up two books, but it is the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. The first one is House of Earth and Blood. Second one is House of Sky and Breath. I read both of these this year and loved them. It took me a little bit with the first one. I wasn't loving the main character at first, but the more I read, like right when I was getting to a point where I was like, if she's going to be like this throughout the entire series, I can't do it. But then something happens and a switch gets flipped and I was like, thank you. This is what she needed. It was fantastic. And then I loved her from then on. Like I'm totally Team Bryce. This is a adult. It's romantasy, I guess is what we're calling Sarah J. Maas now. Yeah. In that category, since that's kind of a newer thing, but definitely an urban fantasy. It's more of an urban setting. It's set in a city. There's, different types of like demons and angels are the big one in here. All sorts of magical beings and gods and stuff like that. And it was fantastic. I loved it. It was just off the rails and in a really, really great way. Great female character. And Hunt is everything. He might be my favorite male character. I'm not kidding. I love him so much. Book 3 comes out at the end of January. You better believe I will be buying that thing right away and reading it right away. I cannot wait for book number 3, especially the ending of this one. My jaw was on the floor. I had not been that affected by an ending in a very, very long time. Until you see what number 1 is, which you probably already know. But this is number 2. It was number 1 for a very, very long time. Something else knocked it off, but just barely. I mean, I'm obsessed with these. So I cannot wait for book 3. Loved. And number 1, of course, is Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. Yes, they are a set. They go together, never to be separated. Speaking of endings, this ending and then this ending, I'm still tender. I'm still tender about this ending, you guys. I loved these books so much. I was completely invested. I was obsessed. I read this one twice. 2 different times I read this book and bought this one immediately and hosted a midnight party for it at the store and just devoured it and obsessed. And I can't stop thinking about it. It is so good. I just ate it up like candy. It's not for everybody, and I completely understand that. This is another like romantasy type thing involving dragons, and the dragons are so good. And it's set at a dragon riding school, so you get that school academic setting as well, and you're seeing them learn new things, and it's just so good. And they go through trials, and not everyone makes it out alive. And I cried. This book made me cry both times. Both times. I knew what was coming and I still cried in the first book. And I just adored it. I really did. And the whole reading experience with this. And then, I got to meet Rebecca Yarros, and she is just so lovely and so kind. And it was just so special, to have this whole experience with, reading it and then having a midnight release party where everyone is so excited for book number 2 that we had a midnight release party and people came and they had a great time. And, then getting to meet the author and getting my book signed. And it was so special. It really, really was. This is one of the best reading experiences I've ever had. And I cannot wait for book 3, which will probably be at the end of the year, from what I am absolutely stalking Rebecca Yarros about. Just wanting to see updates and where she is in her process and everything. And she's actually very good about updating on it. But as soon as book 3 comes out, that will be in my hot little hands and I will be very excited to read it. But loved these so much. Okay, guys, those were my favorite books that I read in 2023. So much fun. So much fun. It was a good reading year. Like, the really good ones were really good, and I'm very happy about them. All right. Let me know what some of your favorite books were for 2023. Have you read any of these that I talked about? Let me know if you did, and I will see you guys again soon. Hope you have a great day. Bye.